So welcome to another episode of EPIGRAM. Today we have a good friend and colleague, Hiroshi Jacobs. I just want to tell you a pre-introduction of this gentleman over here. Follow me. I'm gonna wrap this. So Hiroshi is an artist and an architect living in Washington D.C. His design and artwork have appeared in numerous of publications and exhibitions, including the Surface Magazine, Bloomberg Business Week, the Harvard GSD platform, the Decor in New Orleans, the Venice Biennale, the Merch of Art Festival, and the Harvard Art First Festival. Also, he's the founder of Revit City and also author of the Chameleon software that is a mix between true softwares, Revit and Grasshopper. Welcome.
Thank you.
How's
Thank
it
you
going?
for having me. Very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just going to the background, I think one of the first things you do was actually creating Revit City. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started Revit City, which is a community-based website for users of a popular design software called Revit that's used very heavily in the architectural industry. I started it while I was still in college, in undergrad, 15 years ago. And at that time, Revit was not a heavily used software in the industry, but I had started to use it through one of the internships that I had. And I noticed that there wasn't really a community of users out there, and I really needed a community so that I could learn the software. So working with my brother, I started this website. And over the last 15 years, Revit has become more and more and more popular in the industry, and so has the website as a consequence of that.
So how many people visit your website now?
It's over 1 million users, which
Wow.
is 10 times the number of users as there are members of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects.
Wow.
So I'm proud about that. And we get about 2 million unique visitors per month. So it's a very heavily used website.
So you did this while you were in school?
While I was in school.
Before you finished?
It was my final year of school. So I was also starting this website.
That's awesome. And how it comes with the other software work that you had done, like the Chameleon?
The Chameleon is a software that actually connects two different software. It connects Revit with this other design software called Grasshopper, which is a software that is used by a lot of kind of techie architects who want to use data to create data-driven designs. So it's a visual programming tool, and Chameleon works with Grasshopper to connect it to Revit, which is a kind of production tool for architecture. So it's connecting a design software with a production software. It's the sort of middleman in between creating that connection so data can be used for production.
That's awesome. So I know that after you have been so involved in the tech world and technology, you also have transitioned also to the art community.
That's right.
So you have a background of more of the back end and the front end when developers talk about,
Right.
And I'm intrigued about you also created the Hijack group that you have developed. How many art installations now?
Probably 8 or 9.
Eight or nine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I have a full-time job as an architect, so it's one of those things that's done in my spare time, and I try to do 1 or 2 a year over the last couple of years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So tell me how that started. Like what you were you have like a bone of like entrepreneurship, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what made you also start engaging also in the artist community? What drive you? Was a competition? What happened there?
Well, what happened was I've always been interested in art. That's why I went into architecture school.
Okay.
The stuff with technology was really about design and how do we impact design. What are the tools that we're using to design? And I've always been interested in tools, but only as a kind of means to an end. It's not the most important thing. Technology is not the most important thing to me.
Okay.
It's the design that comes out of the use of the technology that's important.
Okay.
And so I wanted to focus more on the sort of end product of design rather than the back end, as you say.
Yeah.
So I started getting into art installations several years ago. I think the first one that I really worked on was with a friend of mine called Casey Hughes,
Okay.
who's a really great architect out of LA. Met him in grad school, and we worked on this project together at the GSD. And I sort of happened on it by happenstance. It was really Casey's project, and he kind of brought me in, and we worked together to kind of develop the project. And it was a really successful project. There were some challenges that we came across, which we resolved, I think, in an elegant way. And that process of having an idea and then trying to execute it, having issues with it, and then figuring out a solution was something that was really fun to me. Having those issues was really fun, and really dealing with the kind of physical construction nature of the project was something that drew me to do it over and over again. Because as an architect, we don't really build the things that we design for the most part.
Yeah.
And having that physical connection to what's being created was a great experience for me, and that's something that I wanted to do over and over again. So getting into the art world, it's about having that physical connection to the design that I'm creating, but it's also about studying and kind of identifying issues within a smaller scale, a more limited scope, that can be resolved in a much more efficient way than architecture. Architecture takes years to create and to come to fruition, and with art, it could take just a matter of a few weeks or a few months. And so that combination of working with the physical thing and then also evaluating ideas much more quickly is really where the art practice drew my interest, and something that I can't stop doing.
That's awesome. I feel you. I'm a baby in this community of art stuff, and the feeling you get when you build your first thing,
Yeah.
and the confidence you get after.
Right.
Like, because you're in the computer all the time, you quickly understand all the tools to build stuff in the software. But when you touch it and do it yourself,
right,
it just changed the game. I think so.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think I hear you when you're saying that. And with many with 9 projects now, I can imagine how many back and forth between the scale of the computer and building something.
Right.
How much different you start thinking when you're doing a new project now.
There tends to be a kind of gap between what is designed and what is built, both in architecture and in art. And it's kind of navigating that gap and trying to figure out how to get over that gap. That's probably the most interesting part. Maybe the most challenging, and in the moment, not the most fun sometimes, but in the end, it's a really rewarding process to get over that gap.
So for the people are out there that I know I have a few friends or other people that are creating their own things, etc. Can you talk a little bit about the success and also the failures? You have worked on an art installation that actually didn't went the way you wanted, or
yes, no, I've worked on several installations where the final product was. Well, one that was really different from the initial idea, and it was really different from the initial idea because the initial idea was probably too aggressive and too idealistic. And so this one project that I'm thinking about, which I won't mention, but because you'll never know, is it started out very aggressively large and probably irresponsible. And through the process of actually building it, we were on site building it. We realized it wasn't a good idea.
Okay.
And so on the fly, we completely changed the design, went in a totally different direction using the same materials, and I think it came out well in the end. But that was a kind of eye-opening experience for me. Actually, physically building something, you have to think about what is physically possible, what is prudent to do, in addition to the sort of grand ideas that are in your head. So that was an interesting experience for me.
That's cool. I would love to know a little bit of your process. I think different designers have their own take of how to start something. People sometimes starts with a strong concept of some wording or something like that. Other people are more formal, like I think there's a form that really can drive and get the attention that I need in this place, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. There's
Right.
hundreds of ways of starting something.
Sure.
There's something that really, after your experience, what really resonate to you, like in the best ways to start a new art project?
Sure. That's a great question. And it's something that I think about a lot. And I think it's something that has changed for me over time, my process. And over time, I've been sort of trying to figure out what is my voice, what am I doing with these art projects, what am I actually studying. I think about them as experiments in space and design. And so what am I experimenting on? And it's something that hasn't been clear to me all the time. But one of the things that I've noticed myself always being interested in is the relationship between a person and the space that they're interacting with, whether it be architecture, urban planning and design, or something at the scale of an art installation. And so I'm always, when I start the design process, I always think about what is the experience that I want to experiment with this art installation. And usually it's about creating, let's say, a sort of confusion about the relationship that a person has with the art piece. Okay. So I like to experiment with depth of field, kind of overlapping patterns that allow someone to, or maybe disallow someone to have a complete understanding of what they're looking at, what they're dealing with as they move around the piece. And that misunderstanding of the piece is something that I hope drives them to kind of investigate it a little bit, to get a little bit closer, to walk a little bit further away, to move around it. So it's about sort of compelling motion through and around the piece that I find myself always interested in experimenting with. So, and that plays itself out in different ways. Not all of my installations look the same, or use the same materials. There are some common themes, I think, but okay. It's always about that interaction that I want to try to compel.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I going with that, I'm intrigued because of you, we find the opportunity to have a space to develop also our work, and in Brooklyn. So I don't know. Tell me how this thing starts to move in that direction, because maybe from a little project start becoming more formal in the way that you have your own studio that you share now with other artists that have a same drive to keep developing this stuff in collaboration. So tell me like the story behind that, and maybe where is the future of this,
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the physical studio space, which is about 500 square feet, it's not a huge space, it came out of the desire to not do these things in my living room.
Yeah.
That's where it really came from. I used to develop art installations at my home, and that tends to be not the greatest thing. So it really kind of grew out of the need for space, and artist space in DC is really hard to come by. This is an expensive city to live in and to rent space in, and so I've been on the lookout for artist space, a studio space, for several years, and this space came about through an application process with Cultural DC. Okay. Cultural DC is a nonprofit organization that tries to elevate the arts in DC. They work with emerging artists and established artists. They run a couple of the theaters in the city to really kind of elevate the arts visibility in the city. And they work with the owner of a building in Brookland that has put forth enormous resources to create artist space at the Arts Walk in Brookland. So I was lucky enough to be able to secure one of those spaces, and so we're trying to turn it into kind of a place where art happens, and having other artists there as well helps to create a sense of community and camaraderie with people like yourself. So that's cool. I'm happy to have you there.
Oh, thank you, man. I'm very lucky. So yeah, Hiroshi, so I was intrigued about like how you have done your work in different phases. You started with the technology behind Revit City, the other softwares that you have worked for Grasshopper and Revit, and also working through your art projects in your career. And I'm thinking if there's something that you have been looking forward as a next step. Talking about that, I have gone recently to different art installations that include a lot of more technology in their installations. And I can imagine the process of this is quite different, like the Art Tech House, etc. So I don't know, can you share something about that? Do you really have been thinking about like doing things a little bit different with the technology that we have available now?
Yeah, certainly. You know, I don't want my projects to be about technology, but the use of technology in the art world has increased in the last several years. You know, the technology for interactivity has become a lot more accessible in the last couple of years. You know, with the Xbox Connect and different types of lighting technologies that you can get a lot more interactivity without a lot of kind of back-end programming. So it's become more accessible. And so it's definitely something that I've been thinking about recently, and I've started toying with some different technologies to see kind of what is out there that might be useful in the artwork that I do. You know, thinking about the idea that I want there to be an interactive component to the art that I do. I want there to be to sort of compel the motion that I was talking about earlier. But I definitely don't want it to be all about technology. There's some art out there that it's really all about the technology, and the technology creates all of the interaction. I'm interested in more of that kind of co-creation of interaction through the physical, something that's physically there and is unchanged physically, and something that's more dynamic in terms of lighting. There's been a lighting component to a lot of my projects. But the interactivity part has really been driven by the physical, not the kind of digital. And I'd like for that to continue, for the physical to really drive the interaction. But you know, there could be some digital component that really adds to that experience. And I'm sort of thinking about that now and coming up with different ideas of how that might interact with the physical.
Cool. So going with that, it's always a challenge. Now that the projects that we have worked recently, clients love what we do and what we present to them, etc. But when we start arriving to the numbers, there's always a challenge.
Yes.
Because a lot of people want a lot, but with this.
Right.
So I have seen some technology elements have become more affordable, but it's always quite a challenge. So now thinking about that, you think there may be a way out of the tunnel to really get into this and also make it affordable for some potential clients?
Yeah, it's money is a difficult issue often when you're, especially in the art world. Patrons of art often want a lot for very little, and I've had this conversation with a number of artists and people who are involved in the art world here in DC, and there's a push by artists to make sure that clients understand the value of what they're getting, and to value artists as much as they value other value generators. Art in the city and everywhere really is a value added thing. It's adding value to a development, it's adding value to a public place, and getting clients to understand the value of that and to value it monetarily is important. So I have started always starting with the budget. The first thing that I always add is an artist fee, not because I'm greedy, not because I really want the money. It's because I want the clients to value the artist as someone who is adding to the culture of the city, and that should be valued. So that's number one. In terms of integrating technology into the art installations, you're right. Technology and lighting, things like that, add very quickly to the cost of things, and so that's always a challenge. Is there wants to be this technology component, and clients like that. They want that. I think it's really interesting, and sort of helping them understand that you can very quickly change the numbers with the addition of technology. Now it has become more accessible. The cost of LED lighting has gone down tremendously in the past couple of years, so that's certainly helping the numbers game. But creating something physical, the physical material costs for a large scale installation can be much lower than the digital costs, than the lighting costs. For example, lighting can be extremely expensive. So
That's cool.
It's going down a little bit, but there's still a game to be played there.
Great. So you hit on a point there in terms of the community and the impacting community too. And I always close this conversation about, like, we live in the city DC that when I arrived like 9 years ago, the art community wasn't that large.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few big corporations of architecture, some locals, but in the past years you have seen a drive. Like, things have changed quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an amount of people moving here too.
Yeah.
And you can see a lot of more art in the streets that never you see before,
Mm-hmm.
more contemporary projects.
Right.
So I just want to close and thinking about you, like what could be like the way we could think as a role as designers to help in this process of engaging the public in a more smart way
Mm-hmm.
with all these art projects,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe drives, I don't know, educate the people of the city to a more, I don't know, sensitive community.
Right.
Because I don't know, I think this sounds complicated, but somehow I feel like DC was very formal before.
Yes.
And somehow, as the nature of our human beings, like, people start to put things a little bit more freely and
Yeah.
more fondly. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was just at an event last week where a number of members of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts were there. The U.S. Commission of Fine Arts is a organization that is a government entity that's tasked with protecting the public space in DC, and making sure that what is developed in the public sphere is appropriate for the city that we live in, for the capital of the country. And one of the things that they were talking about was the idea that creating an equitable public space in DC is something that is really important, and something that we need to continue to focus on as a city, making sure that the public spaces of our city, everyone feels welcome in. And it's something that I've been thinking about as an artist, is how do I, as an artist, participate in making sure that the art and the way people interact with the public spaces in our city remain equitable, or become more equitable than they are. So just thinking about, what can my art say or do to create interactions between different types of people in the public space of our city. I'm happy to sometimes have the opportunity to develop these art installations in public spaces. And so, just thinking about my next projects, that's one of the things that's on the forefront of my mind, is how does this art make people feel equal? And it's a small contribution, yeah, to the dialogue about equality, but I think it's the small contributions aggregated in the whole that make a city feel more culturally inclusive and make people feel like this is their city and not, just a city for the whole country. It's really our city.
That's
So that's what I try to do with my art. I try to make a very small contribution to the dialogue about equality in our city, making sure that the people who live in our city, many of whom are locals or have been here for a long time, feel like it's their city and not just the city of the United States government. There are locals here. There are people that have grown up here, who've lived here for a long time, and we need to feel like this is our city. The public spaces are ours as much as they are for people from other parts of the country.
That's awesome. Well, Hiroshi, this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation we had.
Same. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, guys, this is like the end of this conversation. I hope we can see each other again next Monday. So please subscribe to our channel if you like what we are doing, and see you guys in the next one. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
See you later. Ciao.